The only people I'm trying to offend here are terrorists, and we don't care about that. Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new episode of Business Blaze. I am your boy with the blaze. Recently in an episode I discussed how I have to stop shouting as much. I've actually started working with a singing teacher. And because I didn't know how to find someone who could help me take care of my voice. I used to do a lot of theatre in the past, and I once had some singing lessons. I'm a terrible singer, don't get any ideas. And I was like, who would be able to help with this? So I hired a singing teacher who is giving me some vocal exercises. So hopefully we'll be back to the shouting in Business Blaze, but doing it properly so I don't absolutely destroy my voice and therefore my career. This episode is brought to you by Sheath. Sheath is basically, well, I'm going to tell you more about them in a bit, but it's a revolutionary, game-changing, world-altering, I mean, in terms of how world-altering underwear can be, but I mean it's very close to you all the time. I'm wearing Sheath right now, and I tell you, I'm comfortable. Sheathunderwear.com/blaze for 20% off and keep your PP happy. I'll tell you why it's called Sheath as well. Get excited for that one. And this episode is Bravely. I'm not sure if this is the title you've seen on YouTube, but the working title for this one is The World's Best Terrorist Attacks. And obviously the joke here, because it's 2021 and we have to explain jokes which could be potentially insensitive, is that obviously the best terrorist attacks are the ones where it's like, oh yeah, he tried to bomb a plane with explosive underwear and he just ended up blowing his off. Speaking of underwear, Sheath underwear won't blow your off. So obviously those are the best terrorist attacks. This actually a few years ago I was sitting down, I had lunch with a friend of mine. This was back, it was years ago. I was just doing top 10s and he was, Simon, I've got a video suggestion for you. Have you considered doing the world's best terrorist attacks? And I was like, Dan, I'm not sure if that's gonna fly, but now I have a platform where we can cover things like the world's best terrorist attacks. Dan, this one is for you. Make sure you get some Sheath, all right, man? Come on, support me, support the sponsors. What happens here is if you're new, I will ramble for approximately 14 minutes, then we'll actually get into some content that is written by Danny, added to in largely shite ways by me, and then it will be memeified by our resident memologist, Sam. One of the occasionally frustrated things about writing a new Business Blaze script, Danny, there is nothing frustrating about writing a Business Blaze script, all right? All right? Do you like how instead of shouting there, I just use my outside voice? He's getting close! No! Quite aside from being forced against my will Danny, we've talked about this. Imagine that in a shouting voice. On a broken typewriter with 3 missing keys and a random electric shock function is that crushing moment when I realise that the internet has once again led me up the garden path and down a haunted well of deception. Ooh, Danny, the words. For someone who doesn't like typing on the broken typewriter that I've generously provided you with, you sure do go wordy sometimes. Is that a double metaphor? Not a metaphor, what's it called? Like a,
Double whammy. Double whammy.
God, I'm dumb. Like, down the garden path. It's like a saying, but there's an actual word for it. Let's move on. I'll sometimes start planning a section around a juicy and bizarre highlight of a story which has been widely reported in the press, only to discover that when I dig a bit deeper, that the interesting bits were completely fabricated. Welcome to my life, Danny. It's like the Today I Found Out channel is basically this. It's like, yeah, everyone thinks this, and you're all wrong. Today I Found Out is another channel that I do. If you're here and you don't know about that one, I'm not sure how. It's got many times more subscribers. It's much more popular, but I'm here for you, Blazies. Thank you, Blazies. I love you. I don't know why I'm calling you Blazies now. Everyone knows that you're the legends. And now I've got to plug the gap with another 800 words on communism. Danny, every script, the joke is getting tired. Someone the other day was like, Simon, I just stopped watching Business Blaze. The talk about communism, the repetitive in-jokes, it just feels like the same thing every week. And I'm like, okay. Thanks for letting me know. No, this happens all the time. You've just overestimated how much I care. The short fake story of the Iraqi terrorist, K. Rana Jet isn't a particularly good example of this. It only took a few seconds to spot the gaping hole in the plot, but it's relevant to today's fun pack to look at some of the greatest terrorist attacks of all time. Back in 1994, a UK tabloid ran a story which continued to gather steam until in years later when it was picked up by the Darwin Awards. Oh, I love the Darwin Awards, mostly. I mean, one, because they're super entertaining. Also, secondly, because whenever I make a video about them, it gets hundreds of thousands or millions of views, and obviously that means I make more money. So yay. Thank you, Darwin Awards, which are, I thought, you know, oh, you're gonna be worried, is that like a trademark? Is that copyrighted? No, it's just like the word for something. It came from like Usenet groups back in the day. The more you know. Oh my god, we're gonna be here forever today. The story goes that K. Rana Jet posted a letter bomb to a busy location in the UK, but neglected to put enough postage stamps on the lethal package. When it arrived at his house with return to sender stamped on the front, K failed to recognize the package, opened it up, blowing himself to bits in the process. Mwah! I'm disappointed this is fake. Because it's always great. I mean, obviously there's the danger of the postal officers and all of this stuff, but I mean, it ended beautifully, the fake story, I mean. Now, although terrorists have a reputation for not being the brightest spark in the fuse box, I really hope there aren't bright sparks in my fuse box. It's difficult to believe that anyone would bother to put a return address on the letter bomb, that's true. If he wanted to be really smart, he'd just write the return address as another really busy location. So, I mean, worst case, it gets returned to sender and it goes up. Why am I giving the terrorists tips? For fuck's sake, Simon. The UK tabloid that originally ran the headline, The People, isn't exactly considered to be the most credible news source in the world. I've never heard of The People. And I used to work in a newsagents. Have I discussed this before? Is a newsagents the same word in the UK and the US and everywhere else? The Australians probably have a really weird word for it, like the newsies or something. I bet they do call it the newsies. Please, Australians, tell me you call it the newsies. You have such brilliant slang words. I'm jealous. It's where you buy a newspaper. What are we doing? The story appears to have been inspired by an old Roadrunner cartoon from 1966, in which Wile E. Coyote attempts to post a bomb to his arch rival, only to have it handed back to him with a postage due label by the Roadrunner cunningly disguised as a postman. In case you haven't seen it, I won't spoil the end. Danny, you spoiled the ending already. But we're not dealing with cartoon characters here. Most people probably don't appreciate just how much thought and consideration and hard work goes into becoming a terrorist. This is not a career path for the faint-hearted part-timer. You need to be completely on your game when you're in the tricky business of blowing yourself and your foes to kingdom come in the name of an invisible man in the sky. Yeah.
Yeah! I have the power of God!
Oh, people are like, Simon, I don't like you making fun of my religion. It's like, oh, don't worry, I make fun of all religions. It's all equal opportunity. Honestly, so are the atheists. Everyone can be a target. You're all ridiculous. Admittedly, there is always a bit of risk involved, and not everything is destined to run exactly according to plan. But we'll hopefully not be focusing too much on the negative side of terrorism as we rattle through some of the most memorable golden moments from the archives of blood and carnage and one-way tickets to an eternal void. Let me just stop on religion for a second. So my grandparents, I'm not religious. In case you couldn't guess. I also wouldn't describe myself as an atheist. I just don't have... It's just never something that's been a part of my life. However, my grandparents are very religious, and they're like, what's it called? Where you tell people to become religious, like, annoying. No, I know there's a proper word for it. Evangelical, big brain. They're quite evangelical. And I remember like being a kid, you know, teenager, maybe I was like 14 years old. We're all sitting around the dining room table. And my granddad has he tells some stories. He'll definitely go on. And this one time, we're just having a conversation. He goes, oh, well, that reminds me of the time that John or whoever put Moses in a basket and sent him down the river and he got stuck in the reeds or something like that. And I'm like, and it came so out of the blue. It was like he just wanted to turn the conversation around to religion. And I'm like, Granddad, what does that have to do with anything we were just talking about? And my mum is just like... And afterwards she's like, sorry I gave you that, but you know how Granddad is? And I'm like, yeah, I do. Hopefully he's not watching this. I know my mum sometimes watches this, so apologies. Let's just get into it. School days. Before you're allowed to put on your big boy pants and go forth into the world of active terrorism, it's usually a good idea to get a bit of expert training under your suicide belt. But I would recommend choosing a terrorism school and with good reviews and testimonial. Trustpilot is your friend. Why am I giving tips to terrorists? Instead of just plumbing for the first one that appears at the top of the alphabetical list in yellow pages. AAA Terrorism School. One outdoor classroom to strike off the list would be a training camp set up by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant in 2014, an extremist Sunni group which had recently broken off from Al-Qaeda and were now focused on wrestling with the Shia-dominated army of the Iraqi government. Oh my god, I know nothing about politics. I know the Shias and the Sunnis don't like each other. I don't know why, even though I'm fairly sure I've made a video about it. I apologize. The only people I'm trying to offend here are terrorists. and we don't care about that. Situated in a farming area just outside of Samarra and only about 60 miles from Baghdad, the first lesson on the timetable during one Monday morning in June was bombs and explosive belts. It's possible that the proper instructor was off sick that day and a stand-in from the teaching pool had been drafted in at short notice, the substitute terrorist teacher. The 21 eager students gathered around for a practical demonstration of how to construct an explosive belt, but the absent-minded teacher appeared to have a lapse in memory and totally forgot that he was using live ammunition. Oh no. Oh yes! As he cheerfully demonstrated that all-important detonating technique, the explosive belt went off in his hands, killing himself and all 21 students in attendance that day. Oh no. A further 15 nearby wannabe militants were wounded even though they weren't part of the class. They were probably doing PE in the gymnasium next door. As an added bonus, the lesson was being filmed as part of a propaganda video, although it's not clear if any of the footage survived. Probably not, right? This could be a missed opportunity. In the UK, you can earn 250 quid from sending your stuff into the ITV show You've Been Framed. Is You've Been Framed even a thing? It's like caught on camera, where it's like someone does something crazy on camera. Didn't this go out of the... people just post it on TikTok or YouTube, right? This story didn't garner much sympathy from local Iraqi citizens who had been reeling from a recent spike in sectarian violence, which had seen over 1,000 deaths in the previous month alone. One guy who worked in a nearby liquor store burst out laughing when a TV crew broke the news to him and asked him his opinion. He said, "This is so funny. It shows how stupid they are. Those dogs and sons of dogs." I don't know if they watered down his language, but there's other ways I'd describe terrorists.
You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach!
Hermione, no!
Another local resident who had lost a good friend in a suicide bomb attack a few years earlier was equally unmoved. He revealed, "I hope their graves burn, and all the rest of them burn as well. I was not happy with the number killed though. I wanted more of them to die." Holy shit. Yeah, the terrorists. Maybe he should have just been a bit more patient. Wednesday afternoons are usually double period landmine planting if the weather stays dry. Do terrorists use landmines? It's a bit old school. TikTok, T-I-C-K, T-O-C-K, not like the Chinese social media platform. Back in September 1999, a couple of curious things happened simultaneously in two different cities in northern Israel. In the port city of Haifa, a car randomly exploded in a parking lot, killing nobody else other than the unfortunate guy who happened to be sitting in the driver's seat at the time. Meanwhile, over in Tiberias, there's a city called Tiberias in Israel? That's rad. On the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, a moving car randomly exploded at exactly the same time, injuring a 73-year-old female passerby who thankfully survived and wiping out the two guys inside the vehicle. Oh, I think I know this one. I think this was the one that I gave to Danny as an example of great terrorist attacks. It was later revealed that the dead men in both vehicles were terrorists who had been carrying bombs in their cars, but it wasn't immediately clear why they'd bothered to blow themselves up and injure only a single nice old lady. As far as terrorist attacks go, it sounds a bit lame despite the fact that the bombs were meticulously prepared and had the capacity to kill several busloads of innocent civilians. But it sounds as if the most plausible theory boils down to a simple matter of very poor timekeeping. Yeah, I definitely know this one. The bombs and timers were believed to have been prepared by West Bank Palestinians before being passed over to drivers from an Israeli village who were meant to park the two cars in key locations during rush hour at 5:30 p.m. and then scupper before they went off. Cowardly terrorists. Not even dying with your bombs. Come on, that's terrorism 101. You're suicide bombers. Get it together.
Why won't you die?
The only good thing about terrorist attacks is where the terrorists themselves dies. It's like 9/11. It's like, do we count the terrorist deaths? Hell yeah, they were the best part of it. Now, Israel had just pushed the clocks back an hour for the winter as they moved from daylight saving time to standard time, but the Palestinians weren't standing for any of that nonsense and refused to live on what they deemed to be Zionist time, so they were happy to stick with being an hour in front on daylight saving time. That is going to come back to bite them. The problem is that the West Bank Palestinians had set their timers to go off at 5:30 p.m., not realizing that the Israeli drivers had put their watches back an hour to fit in with the rest of the state they were about to try and attack. When the watches of the drivers struck 4:30 p.m., they thought they still had a whole hour left to perhaps grab some Taco Bell before considering making a sharp exit. In fact, their time had completely run out. 2 words. Synchronized watches. Yes. There's something else you can learn at terrorist school when they're not trying to blow the classroom to pieces. Indeed. Get your timing right. I'm always like, if I've got a flight to catch and it's like at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm setting like 3 alarms. I'm like double checking everything. Because one, it's like probably a little bit of OCD going on right there. And also I don't want to miss my flight. Come on guys, get it together. I know you're terrorists. Come on. This episode, time for a little bit of an advert. This episode is brought to you by Sheath Underwear. Now they say, Simon, show the Sheath Underwear on screen. I was thinking, oh my god, I'm going to get so much in the comments if I actually just show underwear. So, because they were like, did someone show us used underwear on screen? I'd be like, no, I didn't. Sheath, I kept one of these specifically in the package. So, I've forgotten how to open it though. Oh yeah, you just can open it at the top. I kept one specifically in the package just to offset these comments. They sent me a bunch of them. I'm actually wearing one right now. These are the more brightly available red coloring. I think I'm just wearing regular black. Yes, it is regular black. Well, what is Sheath? Well, it's a bit special and you're gonna get a bit of an insight into my life. You're getting way too much information in today's ad reads. All right, so basically, my thing, I am not a boxer brief person. That is not my thing because I don't know, I like the boxers where it all hangs loose. And I mean, there's disadvantages to that. Men will know. You can like knock them against each other. They can hang loose. It's not the best situation. There are several problems with that. However, I don't like boxer briefs because everything gets crushed up into one place and I don't understand how people like that. It's all getting pushed against each other. It gets all sweaty and weird and itchy and I'm just like, ain't nobody got time for that. So, what Sheath do is, there's a pocket, right? You get the pocket, you put your balls in there, and then here is an absolutely massive hole. It's actually a reasonable sized hole, but let's just advertise it as massive hole for your willy. You pop your dick in there, you pop your balls in there, you put it on, and I was like, this is a bit silly, isn't it? I mean, is this really a thing? And then I put it on, and I've been wearing it like almost 2 days now. I mean, not the same pair. They sent me a bunch. Please don't judge me. And I'm like, oh, I totally get it. So, what do they say about it? I'm sure there's some things I have to read. Traditional boxer briefs are barbaric. I fully agree. Like, I like boxers, not boxer briefs, but these are the best of both worlds. They were invented during the Neanderthal era. That is not true, Sheath. Come on, you can't be lying to my beautiful legends. Sheath has a modern ergonomic design. Ergonomic. Is that like the correct way of me describing that there's a pocket for your balls and a separate pocket for your d***? Yeah, let's just call it ergonomic. Oh, it's the holy grail of underwear. Chafe resistant. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not rubbing against each other. There's nothing weird going on. Also, they don't have this in the ad read. But imagine you're going to take a piss, right? And it's like your dick's in some sort of triple layered pocket. And you're like, what the f is this? No, they thought of that too. You'll see how it works. Oh, they were invented by a US Army soldier. He was on tour in Iraq. I don't know why immediately, I'm such a stupid, I'm so dumb, I'm like, why was he on tour in Iraq? Is he like a singer? And I'm like, oh no, like a military tour. What is wrong with me? It's hot as hell and his boys needed to breathe. All right, so the honest truth is, when I got this sponsor, I was like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? It's gonna be so weird, but it is legit. You should absolutely try it out. Oh, what's my code? You can get a discount. Click the link below, use the code BLAZE, or just go to sheathunderwear.com/blaze, and you'll get 20% off, and it keeps your pee-pee happy. So yeah, bit of a weird one today, but I think you'll like it. I like it. It's legit. If there was an anti-Raid Shadow Legends, this is it. Dangerous deposit. To put our serious hats on for a moment, I know, right? The most lethal and devastating terrorist attack of all time was, of course, the destruction of the World Trade Centers on 9/11, claiming 2,996 innocent lives in total. So Danny's not counting the terrorist lives. The terrorist deaths, the best part of 9/11. Come on, Danny. It wasn't the first time that the World Trade Center had been the target of a horrifying attack. 8 years earlier, in 1993, the Pakistani terrorist Ramzi Ahmed Youssef orchestrated a car bomb attack from a parking garage of the World Trade Center. Youssef and his gang of murderous accomplices drove a rented van into the underground garage, ignited a 20-foot fuse that would detonate the 1,200-pound bomb, and then fled the scene with 12 seconds to spare. Holy shit, guys, cutting it tight. Couldn't you just use like a 40-foot hose and gave yourself 24 seconds? What? I mean, come on. The intention was that the blast would cause the North Tower to fall onto the South Tower, collapsing them both and potentially killing thousands of civilians. That sounds a bit like wishful thinking, doesn't it? Yeah, it just happened to fall in exactly the right direction. In that sense, the attack was a miserable failure, as the North Tower didn't collapse as planned, but it still proved to be a senseless loss of life, as 6 people were killed, over 1,000 people were injured, and the building suffered $500 million worth of damage. Bloody hell. It was an act of barbaric atrocity, but it could have been considerably worse. However, it was the lack of thought put into post-attack strategy that was thankfully to prove the downfall of the group. A guy called Mohammed Salameh had often served as the group's driver, although he was an odd choice, as he had failed his driving test 4 times like an idiot. I like how Danny's just embracing it. We discussed in previous videos how Danny can't pass it. He's tried and failed to pass his driving test many times. And he had a nasty habit of getting involved in road accidents and collisions with other vehicles. Salameh had been in charge of sorting out the rental of the yellow Ford Econoline van that had used in the attack from a branch of Ryder in Jersey City. He had paid a total of $400, half of which was a deposit that he could claim back on safe return of the vehicle. That's not happening. After helping to blow up the van and several trunks of the World Trade Center to bits, Salama felt still pretty entitled to claim back his deposit from Ryder. Dude, what are you doing? After all, we're talking about $200 here. He reported the van as stolen to the police and then made the first of several trips to Ryder to try and negotiate getting back his deposit. On his third and final, dude, it was stolen. I mean, I don't think you get your deposit back if the car's stolen, right? It's a deposit. It doesn't matter if it was your fault. It'd be like renting a tuxedo and you pay like $100 deposit on the tuxedo or whatever, and then someone pukes all over it, who's not you. It's like, they're not gonna be like, oh, it wasn't your fault. They're keeping your deposit because you puked all over their tuxedo, or someone else puked all over your tuxedo. On his third and final meeting with the loss prevention analyst working at Ryder, he was promised his money back. Okay. Except that the loss prevention analyst was actually an undercover FBI agent called Bill Atkinson. That makes sense. The rented van had already been identified as the one used in the bombing by its vehicle identification number on a piece of an axle that had been located in the rubble. How do you not plan for this, terrorists? Come on! Salama was sentenced to 240 years in prison for aiding and abetting the bombing, while his arrest led directly to the uncovering and capture of most, if not all, of the terrorist group. The ringleader, Yusuf, was eventually hunted down in Pakistan in 1995 and is also serving 240 years in prison after the police discovered files in his computer which outlined a plan to bomb 15 American airliners in 48 hours and a plot to assassinate Pope John Paul II. As far as I can make out, Ryder kept the $200 deposit. This is amazing. I mean, also, dude, don't write down your crimes. We've discussed this. Tips for terrorists. Don't write down your crimes. Or at least, I mean, use some encryption or some shit. Come on. The Black Widow. Quickly flicking through the text messages on my mobile phone, it appears that the contact most likely to check in with me over the last year is some guy called HM Revenue and Customs to remind me that I haven't submitted my tax return, which is very thoughtful of him. It's not really necessary because I've submitted my tax returns at the exact time every year for the last 10 years. In fact, I submitted my latest tax return just a couple of days ago and felt a bit sad knowing that HM will go quiet for a bit now, for a little while at least. But give it just a few more months, and I'll start a marathon text messaging cycle all over again. Marketing and spammy text messages might generally be considered quite irritating, but occasionally they come in fairly useful. For example, one of the very last marketing messages to be sent in the year 2010 quite probably helped to save hundreds of lives. A female terrorist, identified only as the Black Widow, was planning on wearing and detonating a suicide vest during the packed-out New Year's Eve celebrations at Red Square in Moscow. Although the Russian authorities released very few details on the mysterious Black Widow, it's now believed that she belonged to a jihadist group which had already killed 35 civilians in a terrorist attack at Moscow's Domodedovo airport just a few days earlier. Tightwad Islamist terrorists operating in Russia often use bargain bucket mobile phones as cheap and cheerful detonating devices. The suicide bomber, togged up with explosives, carries the mobile phone in his or her pocket, while the handler, who it has to be said seems to get the better end out of all of this, observes from afar and sends a text message at the moment when they feel maximum damage can be inflicted. Yeah, they don't trust the people with the bombs strapped to their chest. The bomber doesn't get a chance to read the message or even hear the notification beep. The arrival of the message is enough to instantly trigger the suicide vest. Bearing that in mind, it's usually a good idea to keep your phone switched off until you're ready to go boom. Several hours before the New Year's Eve celebrations kicked off in Red Square, the Black Widow was still in a safe house preparing for the fireworks ahead and trying on the suicide vest for size. Oh god, he's going to get attacked. Well, can't they just have it triggered from a specific number? It's like a message arrives, it's like, hey Danny! However, she had carelessly left the phone switched on, and when an unexpected text message popped up on the device, it blew her to smithereens before she'd even had a chance to get in the party mood. Quite brilliantly, the message was just a text from a new mobile phone operator, wishing the Black Widow a happy new year. Oh shit. Cabin fever. When 55-year-old Somalia national Abdullahi Abdi Salam Borla arrived in his wheelchair at the airport in Mogadishu, Somalia, and checked in for his flight to Djibouti in the Horn of Africa. There was little evidence that the family and Chatty Man was part of a sinister plot involving over 10 other guys who actually worked at the airport. Officially, he was traveling for medical reasons and was happy to tell anyone who asked that he was going to get his gammy leg sorted out. In fact, he was hiding a bomb within a laptop, which itself was hidden away in his wheelchair. Oh, there's many layers of bomb hiding. In the plan, orchestrated by Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab, was for Abdullah to get comfy and settled on the plane after he had discreetly removed the laptop from his foldable wheelchair. The bomb would go off on a set timer just as the plane hit cruising altitude, potentially triggering a secondary explosion in the fuel tank and killing 81 people on board. The flight was delayed by an hour, which the passengers probably found quite annoying at the time, but it was an hour's delay that saved their lives. Although Abdullahi boarded Flight 159 that day in 2016, along with all the other passengers, and the Airbus 321 reached a height of 11,000 feet, the short delay meant that his laptop bomb detonated before the plane hit cruising altitude. This meant that the cabin was not yet fully pressurized. There wasn't a huge amount of difference between the air pressure inside and outside the cabin. Oh my, this was extremely lucky. Also, can't you just use like an altimeter trigger or something? Why am I giving tips to terrorists? Although they know this because they've seen movies. There's that movie, it's like Speed, but with a plane, and they have to keep it above a certain altitude or something. Is it Speed 2? No, that's the one with a ship. God, that movie was terrible. When Abdullahi's bomb went off in his lap, it blew a hole in the fuselage above the wing, which was just big enough for unlucky Abdullahi to get sucked out through. But the impact on his fellow passengers was surprisingly minimal. Some of them probably just looked up from their Kindles with a disapproving mutter of silly old bugger, and then went back to reading 50 Shades of Grey. You imagine just like seeing across the aisle, and there's a little explosion, the guy gets sucked out the hole, you're like, that was close. Well, that's not quite true. 2 other passengers were slightly injured, and the plane was forced to make an emergency landing back at Mogadishu airport. But Abdullahi certainly seemed to come off worse, as his burning body was propelled from the plane through the fresh doorway to doom, eventually coming to land in a little town called Balad. It wouldn't have done his gammy leg any good at all. The damn squib of an inside job was later revealed to involve 10 people working at the airport, including a police officer, a security screener, an immigration officer, most of whom received prison sentences ranging from 6 months to 4 years. What is going on? All of that is way too short. Also, how on earth did you get 10 people involved in this? Who are like people who work at the airport. This is extremely concerning. Remind me to never fly out of, was it Mogadishu? Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm not planning to. On my itinerary for 2021, I mean, it's not just because of COVID that I'm not flying from Mogadishu to Djibouti this year. If you showed me a map of Africa, I would not be... the only thing I know is that they're probably not in South Africa or Morocco, because I've been to both of those countries and I don't think they're located there. If only the group had paid slightly more attention at Terrorist School, they might have learned something useful from the screening of that educational Roadrunner cartoon where Wile E. Coyote chases after his nemesis while wearing a helicopter helmet stuffed with sticks of dynamite. From memory, I don't think that scene ended well either. It's Roadrunner. It never ends well for the bad guy. Wile E. Coyote is the bad guy? Oh my god, I'm terrible at this stuff. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's brought to you by Sheath Underwear. Get it done. Also, if you'd like to purchase some merch. Oh, look! Look at that. It matches. That's brilliant. Get some merch at purchasethemerch.co, and thank you for watching. Oh no.